Hello, I'm Joel Zachry, and I'm here to talk about Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And when we think of our Great Smokies, nothing else compares. First, I want to thank you for supporting Wilderness Wildlife Week in 2022, and especially I thank the Pigeon Forge Special Events staff for all the hard work they do to make this happen. We get up in front of the podium and do our thing, but they're the ones that actually make it happen in the background, and I'm very grateful to them for making this a professional kind of performance. I want to also thank you for spending your time with me today. A little bit about me so you know where I'm coming from. I grew up just outside of the Smokies, didn't spend a lot of time in the park growing up, but later in life, spent my career in higher education as a biologist, but began exploring the park in 1975, winter hiking. I also led trips to Alaska for 25 years with my wife Kathy, and we completed the Appalachian Trail, part of which runs through the Smokies, in 2005. We're also authors of Bears We've Met, which is available on Amazon. So let's take a look at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and a few things you may already know, but maybe not. First, it's managed by the National Park Service, which comes under the Department of Interior. This is a little bit different than the National Forest, which come under the Department of Agriculture, managed by the U.S. Forest Service. The Smokies straddles North Carolina and Tennessee. And so we have on the western side of the park, Tennessee, and on the eastern side, North Carolina, although it's considered a federal property, a federal national park. The size of it is quite surprising to a lot of people, is about 552,000 acres, 800 square miles, but fewer than 400 miles of roadways throughout the park. It's said to have been fully established in 1934. It's not the oldest national park. You may recognize this symbol. It's a bison. We've never had buffalo in this country, although oftentimes we mistakenly refer to them as buffalo. But this symbolizes an animal, if you've been out west, that lives in our oldest national park, Yellowstone National Park. And Yellowstone was established in March 1872. This animal represents many areas of Alaska, but also Yellowstone, and Yellowstone has quite a population where we have only the black bear in our Smokies. Great Smoky Mountains National Park is not the largest national park. And when I say that, most people think of Alaska, and most of the time they're only partially right. So when you think of Alaska and you think of everything on a large scale, if you go to this particular national park, you're likely to visit in the backcountry this old copper mining district. And this is found almost on every calendar in Alaska when the new calendar comes out for the new year. So what is this national park? Many folks have never heard of it, never been there. It's called Wrangell-St. Elias National Park and Preserve. And it's named after the Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains, which are over 18,000 feet in height compared to our 6,000-foot peaks east of the Mississippi River. It, by comparison, is 13+ million acres in size. So certainly is the largest among national parks and is over 26 times as large as Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So quite often visiting Wrangell-St. Elias, one experiences not so much vegetation like we have, but large ice fields and rivers. And it's known for these backcountry areas. A little bit different than our Smokies, this particular park has mainly two entrances, and basically one is open most of the time to vehicles. And you drive what is called the McCarthy Road, which is an old 60-mile railroad bed to get to the backcountry. Great Smoky Mountains National Park is not the deepest by comparison of the national parks. You probably recognize two things here that would lead you to think of Grand Canyon National Park. The burrows and, of course, the deep gorge cut through the landscape. Grand Canyon National Park is just the opposite of our high point in the Smokies, but about 6,000 feet down. And here you see the trail cut into the side of Grand Canyon National Park. It's a spectacular park to visit, and an amazing job the trail that was built to make its way down to the very bottom along the Colorado River. Smokies is not the highest national park. And again, we go back to Alaska, formerly called McKinley, but now we refer to it as Denali, Mount Denali, if you will. Denali National Park and Preserve is considered the highest park in that Denali itself is over 20,000 feet in elevation. Again, a lot of ice and snow, spectacular scenery, especially in the fall. But the Smokies surpasses all other national parks in many ways. It is the salamander capital of the world. And while most people don't come to our national park, the Smokies, to see salamanders, we have more than 30 species, more than anywhere else in the world. We have species from the red-spotted newt form that you see here quite often along trails in the spring to Jordan's red-cheeked salamander, found generally in the park and a few other scattered areas. If you ever see Jordan's red-cheeked salamander, you'll recognize it by its red jowls, if you will, its red jaws. And it's not particularly rare in the park, but it's certainly rare in other parts of the world. And so it is known to be found pretty much exclusively in Great Smoky Mountains. So over 30 species of salamanders. It boasts of the highest peak along the Appalachian Trail, Clingman's Dome at 6,643 feet. The Appalachian Trail doesn't pass directly over the highest point, actually, of Clingman's Dome because there's a tower there, but the Appalachian Trail goes off slightly to the shoulder. Hikers completing the Appalachian Trail, either section hikers as we completed in sections over many years, or through hikers that do it all in one burst, if you will, know well the 2x6 blazes found on trees throughout the trail from Georgia to Maine. Those of us like to say from the south, or the folks from the north like to say no, from Maine to Georgia, traveling through 14 states. But the white blaze that you see here, a 2x6 painting, tells individuals hiking they are on the Appalachian Trail. There are over 330,000 of these that mark the trail through the 14 states, and through the Smokies about 70 miles of its length. And in reality, you can walk with 1 foot in Tennessee and 1 foot in North Carolina as you pass along the Appalachian Trail from the southwestern portion of the park to the northeastern portion of the park, because the state line travels along the Appalachian Trail through the park. It's a spectacular pathway, much of it above 5,000 feet, and a permit is required to stay in the backcountry anywhere in the park. Clingman's Dome, of course, is known for its spectacular views, and it is the highest point in the park and the highest point on the Appalachian Trail. And here you see Clingman's Dome in the winter, and the road is closed in late fall because of snowfall at that high elevation. The Appalachian Trail is just down below the actual tower itself. Smokies has the highest density of black bears, and I hesitate to say in the 48 contiguous states because invariably there may be a small pocket of bears in a few acres here and there in state parks or other federal properties. But we have about 1,900 bears in the Smokies. And if we go back to the early 1900s, we had fewer than 300 bears. And so now that number has increased substantially. And so we may ask, why is this? We have better education of people interacting with bears. We've done a better job of marketing strategies to avoid conflicts. We have better law enforcement enforcing the rules where people violate them and put other individuals at jeopardy. The forests have gotten older. The forests are more mature. We have better nutrition and better landscape, better habitat, better water quality in many cases for these animals. And more importantly, they've learned to adapt and to coexist with us if we only give them that chance. So the black bear east of the Mississippi found in the Smokies is black, as you see here, with a brown muzzle and very characteristic black nose, and often said dark, beady eyes. Ears are short and rounded. Bears hear probably twice as well as we do. Their eyesight is very excellent at night. And of course, it's that sense of smell that guides most of their activities. They have an incredible sense of smell, far superior to most all other animals and certainly to human beings. As you see in this picture, they walk flat-footed. They have 5 toes with non-retractable claws and generally are opportunists, feeding on whatever food source is available. Here in our park, about 83% of the bear's diet is vegetation. And why not? Because that vegetation is so abundant and it takes energy to obtain food when we're talking about chasing down a small animal, and certainly a large animal could involve serious injury to the animal that preys upon it. Here you see another view of the black bear from behind, and you see that brown muzzle. Bears generally want no part of our activities, but will defend their cubs in their space. And that's why it is in the national park throughout the country. And with grizzlies as well, we want to keep our safe distance. So what is that? With the black bear, we say 50 yards. And at 44 feet per second, a full charge speed, a black bear can be in your face in 3 seconds. And so it's important to follow the law and keep that distance. It's said out west to stay as much as 100 yards from grizzlies. Grizzlies evolved on the plains with nowhere to go, so they're much more aggressive in defending their space, whereas the black bear will often retreat to trees, wanting no part of us. Smokies is rich in Native American history and culture, the Cherokee Indian Nation. There are few areas of national park status among the 63 that are privileged to have a community, a reservation of Native Americans as we do on the North Carolina side of the park. Their heritage, their culture is very much important to the establishment of the park and maintaining the history of the park, and they've contributed greatly to it. The Cherokee Museum on the Cherokee side is a wonderful place to visit and has numerous exhibits to explain the heritage, the culture, and the history of the Cherokee people. Many folks visiting the Smokies may not realize that the Cherokees left behind trees symbolic of our interstate road system signs. And here you see what's called a marker tree, a spirit tree. Now, not every deformed tree is said to be an authentic Cherokee tree, but it's said that they used small saplings to make these bent trees by tying a leather thong at one end, pulling it to the ground, and over time it would grow in a deformed fashion like you see here. Much like, again, an interstate sign would direct traffic on a highway, these trees, marker trees, direct travel along the Cherokee trails. Smokies is the most visited national park, not only because of its multiple attractions, its many parts of nature that are so diverse, but because half the U.S. population lives within 500 miles a day's drive of the national park. It's considered an international biosphere reserve. So what does that mean to us? It means that it is open to people from all over the world. And what an incredible gift that our forefathers gave not only to the United States, to the local people of Tennessee and North Carolina, but to the world in helping to establish friendship and peace and an understanding of the importance of nature. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is rather unique in that we can come and go without a fee. There is no charge to enter Great Smoky Mountains National Park like so many of the other federal properties. But we do have 12 million visitors. We've now broken previous records. And so summertime traffic can be rather daunting, but there's always an isolated trail to find peace and tranquility if we just search for it. But above all of these accolades, what else? What makes the park special? What makes it stand out among other national parks and draw incredible numbers not only from the region, from the United States, but from all over the world? Great Smoky Mountains has a greater diversity of vegetation than all of Europe. And that's an incredible thing when you think about that. It's a temperate rainforest in many areas around the park and within the park. In the Knoxville area nearby, we have about historically 45 inches of rain a year. In the Smokies, there are areas that experience over 100 inches. Why is that? Because all that vegetation gives off moisture through transpiration. It does make sometimes for rather uncomfortable summers in July and August for hikers and visitors because of the humidity. We have over 1,600 species of flowering plants. Nothing like that across the pond, as well as over 100 species of shrubs. Here we have one of many varieties of trillium that bloom in April and draw multiple crowds to come and witness the display of wildflowers. As well, we have the azaleas, a popular place to visit. Of course, there are many balls where azaleas take over as shrubs, as many as 20 plus varieties of these that add to the colorful landscape. Of our 63 national parks, most can only boast of 10 or 12 species of trees. On a recent hike in the park on the eastern side a few weeks ago, in about 1/10 of a mile walk, I said to myself, I'm going to count the different trees that I see and the ones that I know, and I'm not a forester. And I came up with about 20 different kinds of trees. So that's almost twice the number found in most national park properties of the 63. So what do we find in the Smokies? We find over 100 species and counting. So 10 times a greater diversity than all of the other national park properties. What an incredible gift to those of us that live nearby and certainly to the visitors that come to see these magnificent structures. We have trees from the sweet gum that turns its beautiful color in the fall to magnificent large trees and old pockets of old growth forest, and reminding you that much of the park was logged prior to the park's establishment in 1934. It's made a remarkable comeback. Many varieties of oaks, both white oaks and red oaks, that provide food for the big game animals such as the black bear, the turkey. Now we have the reintroduced elk and a herd of about 200, as well as white-tailed deer. So as you come to the park, as you come to the Smokies, go in search of these wonders. And it's important, considering the number of us that enjoy going out there, to take care to not disturb or destroy what you seek and then find. Thank you for joining me.